What's up, guys? Doug Polk here, and welcome back to my podcast. And today we're joined by a guest well known in the world of Bitcoin as an expert on the economics of it, as well as the author of the book, The Bitcoin Standard. I'd like to welcome to the podcast, Saifedean Ammous. Welcome, man.
Thank you for having me, Doug. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So just to give you guys a quick heads up here, we had a few tech issues, so we're trying to do this podcast off of a phone. Hopefully the audio quality is up to par, that we'll be able to hear Saifedean, but time will tell here. Time will tell.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and jump in and talk a little bit about your background for the people that might not know who you are. Can you talk a little bit about where you're from and yeah, just your background would be great.
Yeah, so I'm from Ramallah in the West Bank in Palestine. That's where I mostly grew up, although many would argue I haven't grown up yet. But I've studied in Lebanon from my undergraduate, and then I did my PhD in New York at Columbia University in sustainable development, topic mainly based in economics. And then as I was finishing my PhD, I became very interested in Austrian economics, or the Austrian School of Economics. And that, that became the focus of my research and study. And then when Bitcoin came along, I found it extremely interesting as a case study in that. I was quite skeptical that it would work for the first few years or so. And I was, I wasn't one of these skeptics that was hostile to Bitcoin. I didn't hate Bitcoin. I didn't wish that it would die like most skeptics today do. I thought it was interesting, but I was not convinced that it could survive. I thought, governments would shut it down. They'll find a way to stop it. They'll find a way to make sure that it doesn't work. And, I kept on dismissing it and not taking it seriously until about 2013, 2014. That's when I started to really take it seriously and begin to realize that, this is not just a toy on the internet, and this is not just for dark markets. This might actually be a new technology for performing the function of money. And so I've been studying it closely since 2014 or so. And then in 2017, I started writing a book about it, which was published in 2018 by Wiley. And that's the Bitcoin Standard.
Awesome, man. Congrats, by the way. It's gotta feel great to publish a book on a subject that you feel so passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's truly like you feel that it is a mission, because I spent a lot of time being asked by people, what is this? What does it do? Why is it important? Why does it matter? And you keep writing emails and answering people's phone calls about it, and then you realize, what? Maybe I should just write it out. So it came from like a real demand, from a real calling to just set out what I thought about this, because what I used to think about Bitcoin in 2013 and 14 was crazy for most people. Most people don't agree with my view on economics. And from that perspective, Bitcoin is just a stupid fad that will go away. But the longer it continues to live and the harder it is for it to go away, the more people start to contemplate to think the unthinkable and consider maybe this guy has a point. And so that's where we are right now.
One of the interesting things to me about Bitcoin is, from at least the public perception, I find that the public very closely correlates the price of Bitcoin in terms of how successful it is and in terms of if they were right or wrong. One thing that I see constantly from the content I put out on my channels is when Bitcoin goes down 2K, oh, who's laughing now, Doug? Looks like you were an idiot. And people just get really riled up in where's Bitcoin price at right now? What's your view on the success of Bitcoin in relation to price? Is that something that you follow actively, or do you think, what are your general thoughts on that topic?
I'm not going to say price doesn't matter. Of course, it does matter, but I don't. I don't follow the day-to-day prices. I've recently removed the price app from my phone, and I'm free from having to follow the gyrations of price every 5 minutes. I think the price matters in the long run. For me, it's just if Bitcoin continues to hold value, I would say, if 10 years from now Bitcoin is above $100, that for me is success for Bitcoin. That this is my bar, because I used to follow Bitcoin when it was under a cent, and I was shocked. Sorry, not under a cent, under $1. And I was shocked when it went up above $1, and I thought, now's the time it's going to die. They're going to find ways of killing it. So for me, the fact that it made it past $100 was quite indicative of, okay, this is some serious volume of trading. I mean, if it just manages to continue to hold this 10 years from now, for me, that shows that it is quite serious as a monetary unit. I mean, of course, dropping from 20,000 to 100 would be devastating for the people who bought near the top. But, I always tell people, I'm not trying to advertise Bitcoin. I'm not trying to tell you to buy Bitcoin. And you should really not invest money in Bitcoin that you cannot really afford to lose. It's you should think of it as a very high risk move, and there are always risks involved in it. So don't go in with your life savings and then because if it drops to 100, it's a disaster. But for me, if it drops down to 100, it won't be a disaster. It would still be success. So I think the price does matter, just in the fact that if it continues to hold a lot of value that people store in it, that means it is succeeding as a store of value. And the only way that it can hold value is if the price goes up, because the supply is limited. On another level, the price also matters a lot because the price is, I like to call it Satoshi's Trojan horse. People come into Bitcoin for the sick gains, but then they stay for the Austrian economics and the anarchism and the global revolutionary political order that Bitcoin could unleash. I mean, the majority of people just hear about their friend who put in $100 and now he has $10,000 and they want to get in and they want in on that. And so it's essential for Bitcoin to continue to succeed that the price continues to attract more people. I mean, not essential because, Bitcoin could stagnate for 100 years and then 100 years from now it could start growing more aggressively. But generally, the more the price goes up, the more people are interested, the more people dump fiat currencies for Bitcoin, and the more the price of Bitcoin rises, which attracts other people more and more and more into it. So generally, I think, I'm not going to say the price doesn't matter at all. It does matter. It's a very important metric because it's a measure of how much value is being held in Bitcoin. And that's primarily the metric that's going to determine Bitcoin's success. When a lot of people hold a lot of value in Bitcoin, then it's going to be inevitable that it's going to grow into a sort of global monetary standard. So the price does matter, but not on a day-to-day basis. And I definitely don't trade or speculate or try and beat the market or try and predict what the market is going to be doing.
I've also made it a bit of a point to start checking the prices far less regularly because it absolutely turns into just an addiction at some point, and you're like, why am I even checking this right now? I don't see what bearing this has on my life. So certainly healthy to try and limit the total amount of time spent looking at it. But I want to talk a little bit about something that you said, how in 2013, 2014-ish, your perspective really changed on Bitcoin. And I assumed that, well, I guess I shouldn't assume, but does that mean that at that point you decided that it might be a good either investment vehicle or just store of value? But more specifically, what specifically changed during that period of time where you started to view Bitcoin differently?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is just that the value continued to rise, and that was shocking for me. I thought it would continue to just be a few cents here and there. One guy would have a few $100s and another guy would have a few $100s, just like a fringe community online. So, think about maybe Linden dollars or World of Warcraft bucks or whatever they're called. Just like a small little fringe community online. But as the price continues to go up, it shows that a lot of more people are holding the money, and also that and that the price is going up, which is going to attract more and more people in it. So that's when it starts to matter. Secondly, just the fact that it didn't die, that was quite important because, and I think everybody eventually, this is what it really comes down to. You hear about Bitcoin the first time and you keep dismissing it. But, 3-4 years later, when it just continues to operate impeccably, every 10 minutes, one new block is confirmed and it's broadcast to the network and it continues to operate normally. And the longer this continues, the more it is normalized. Somebody calls it like a mind virus. This just conquers you, and then it just normalizes in your mind the idea that this thing is there and it's there to stay. So there was an element of that. But if I were to name one specific incident, I would say the Silk Road bust, because in my mind, in 2012, 2013, if you'd asked me, and I think there might even be some tweets where somebody did ask me that, what do you think of Bitcoin? And that was what I told them. I said, I think what's going to happen is that one of these new websites or startups that is accepting Bitcoin or talking about Bitcoin or working in Bitcoin, the FBI will just go and find the guy who, some nice preppy kid from Silicon Valley who's working on a little startup, and then they'll just say, well, Bitcoin is used for terrorism and child pornography or whatever, and then take this completely innocent, nice gentleman and throw him in jail and make a lesson out of him. And then that would just be it for Bitcoin. Everybody who has Bitcoin will want to get rid of it. The price will crash. The network security will fall. And then it might be liable to getting attacked. So when the Silk Road bust happened, when you heard about the Silk Road, I think it was in April 2013, I might be wrong, but around that time in 2013, well, okay, that happened. So in my mind, this was supposed to be the thing that would kill Bitcoin. It didn't. Not only did it not kill Bitcoin, okay, the price crashed for a couple of days, but then the price recovered and the price rallied. And even more interesting, the number of transactions that was carried out on the network continued almost unaffected after the Silk Road bust. So this forced me to revise my priors. This is how it changed my mind. I was like, okay, it's clearly growing in value. It's clearly being used as a store of value far beyond what I thought would be reasonable. It's not just a few cents per dollar, because even when it hit $1, I thought this was excessive. And thirdly, this is not just going to be a darknet way for people to buy their drugs, because if it was, then the whole thing would have been hit badly after the Silk Road bust.
What's interesting about that too is that we see new currencies that take the role that once was for internet dark money, with coins like Monero or Zcash. And the reason is because those are actually, well, at least for Monero and ultimately for Zcash as well, they're more based around privacy with the transfer functions. There's no privacy on a public ledger. With Bitcoin, you can see every transaction, so there will be some degree of history for what transactions have been made, and at least some ability to try and trace it. It's still going to be very difficult, but at the real point here is that for criminal activity, for illegal activity, people are generally going to look to use coins more like Monero, which in some ways I do feel like is good for Bitcoin. Yeah, it might take away some people that would otherwise be purchasing Bitcoin, but at the same time, now I think Bitcoin doesn't have to worry about that angle as much, because most of the worst types of transactions that are happening within cryptocurrency are occurring with these other currencies.
Yeah, possibly. I honestly don't really know. I always tell people my view on this is that, if you wanted to buy drugs, if you wanted to do something illegal, going with a shared ledger is possibly the worst starting point. Use cash bills, use any other kind of form of payment. But, this one form of payment just leaves a trail on thousands of computers all over the world. Even with Monero or Zcash or all of these kinds of technologies, I don't trust them well enough, and I don't think there might be 50 people on the entire planet who are qualified to go through the code of Bitcoin and Zcash and Monero and really assess whether this thing is really reliable. I think it's absolutely reckless for anybody to recommend to others that, if you want to buy your drugs, go and use Monero or Zcash or Bitcoin or any of these, because you have no idea about the kind of exploits that could exist, and you're already starting from a place of a ledger that records all the transactions. So I just am not a fan of this idea, and I think the evidence for that is that a lot of criminals are in prison today because they thought Bitcoin was was anonymous and undetectable. I mean, the media portrait of Bitcoin as the money of criminals and the money of the money that's untraceable. All these media articles that show you the guy dressed as a thief attacking your computer. They made people start to think that, if I just use Bitcoin, that's untraceable, and a lot of people are in jail because they believe that. And I just think it's absolutely misguided to try and recommend it that way. At least not at least, but definitely on the main chain. I think once second layer solutions develop for the processing of payment, things like Lightning Network and individual payment settlement companies that would handle other people's payments, well, then I think you can have proper privacy solutions. That's when I think we're going to have a much more rich suite of solutions for people who want privacy with their money. But I would definitely not recommend on the first chain.
Yeah, definitely. While we're on the subject of people being in jail, do you have an opinion on Ross Ulbright's sentence? And I guess you have an opinion on that subject.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a travesty. I think the only thing that he did was that he built a free market. He built an online free market. He built a website where people can buy and sell freely with others without where it's much harder for others to for third parties to intercept it. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think the idea that buying and selling drugs is something criminal, I find to be a huge travesty. Um, People have had their lives ruined by the war on drugs far, 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 far more than the number of people who've had their lives ruined by drugs. So it's a complete travesty, and it's absolutely unacceptable that people go around thinking that it's normal and healthy and acceptable to throw people in jail, destroy their lives just because they chose to consume a substance that you don't approve of. And particularly, as what's really ridiculous about it is, alcohol is probably more harmful and more destructive to people's lives than the majority of illegal, well, maybe not majority, than a lot of the illegal drugs. And some of these illegal drugs are becoming legalized now, and we see that the world is not falling apart. Colorado has not been taken over by zombies shooting up in the street because weed has been legalized, or Portugal or Holland. So clearly, it's absolutely nobody's business if you do this. It's insane that you could go to jail for smoking weed when you have all sorts of other destructive, absolutely terrible substances being sold in grocery stores, like alcohol and sugary stuff. I mean, just the amount of people suffering from the consequences of sugar addiction is enormous. How that is considered okay, you watch advertisement for it, and government even recommends that your child needs 6 to 10 portions of grains per day, which is absolutely poisonous. And then on the other hand, somebody smokes a joint and they go to jail. So I think that's insane. It's also insane because Ulbricht's crime, we don't even know if he did drugs, and I don't think that's part of the crime. It's not that he bought or sold drugs; it's that he facilitated the market. But he just built software that allows people to log on and trade with one another. If they chose to use it for drugs, that's their prerogative. It's none of his business, and he can't be held liable for it. But the real travesty is what we saw in the last week or two, which is that I think it was Wired magazine or some other stupid rag that published a story about how the mastermind of Silk Road had ordered a hit to get a bunch of people killed, and that he was a murderer and a criminal mastermind. And this is what most idiots who read these kinds of retarded newspapers think. This is what they think of the story. Well, he was a drug lord and he was going around killing people, and they think he's just some kind of villain from a Hollywood movie. And guess what? He was not indicted for the murder charges or for the attempted murder. He was not indicted. That stuff didn't even go to court, and the charges were dropped just, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago. So all that he is guilty of is building a website. And so, building a website is code. A website is code. Code is speak. He printed some things on his computer that created software that others used so that they could buy and sell drugs from one another. The fact that you could consider that to be a crime, I think, is an absolute travesty. And the fact that the people in power have conspired to make him out to look like such a horrible villain when he's really not done any of those things is an absolute travesty. And I hope we see him out of jail very soon. It's absolutely disgusting what has happened to him.
I would be inclined to agree with most of that. I think that we see two really separate issues here. First off, we see How bad are drugs? I like that you bring up the sugar, how bad sugars are for you. I saw you with the Bitcoin carnivore club with Jimmy Song and Tone Vays and a couple other people. But and while that's completely true, the problem is sort of this: like, if these are the laws that we have decided as a country we're going to exist by, as stupid as they are, and in my opinion they're quite stupid, at some level we have to enforce them, right, as a society. Otherwise, why are they laws? Weed was legalized here in Nevada. I don't see people getting high every day, although there are certainly people still getting high, but I don't think that these things have a bad repercussion on society in general. I think actually legalizing them is good at many levels. It creates tax revenue. It removes a lot of crime. And then, of course, weed is just not nearly as bad for you as alcohol or sugar. But, we still do have to have some degree of enforcement of our laws. Otherwise, why have laws to begin with? So I guess,
Yeah, no, that's the question. Why have laws to begin with? In fact, I mean, why can't people just voluntarily agree to the laws that they choose to govern themselves? So, I mean, if you want to live in a neighborhood where weed is not legal, or sugar is not legal, or alcohol is not legal, I think that's perfectly fine. You find people who want to do that, and you all agree that in our community, in this neighborhood, or in this town, we don't want to have this happen. I think that's perfectly fine. But the idea that you would impose these sort of things on, and then, everybody has the freedom to move in or out of your city based on that. But the idea that, you just impose it on a country of 300 million people, and the threat, we're using the threat of violence and the threat of killing people or throwing them into jail for it, is absolutely absurd, because, there's no such a thing as a victimless crime. And so, we don't have to just enforce that because, oh, well, we have to have laws and we have to enforce the laws. Well, no, we don't have to enforce laws that require violence to enforce. People can achieve whatever goals they want consensually. You don't want to be around people who smoke pot, in your own home, in your own business, in your own, everything that you own, everything that you control, only associate with people who don't do that. And that's it. Peaceful separation is the way that these things happen. So, Muslims can decide to live in neighborhoods where they don't want to have any alcohol. And then you're not going to get an enforcement problem that requires them to shoot people, because if you don't like the alcohol, you just step out of their neighborhood. If you don't like the alcohol ban, you go out of their neighborhood and you drink. So the idea that we just, and this is like getting into political philosophy, the idea that, we need government to enforce laws, or else, bad things happen and we all die and we fall into chaos, I think it's what government wants you to believe, because it needs a raison d'etre. And fundamentally, this is about enforcing the interests of people in power, and not the interests of the people that are governed. More accurately, there's, the problems are always in coercion. The problem is in the use of force. And so if somebody decides to smoke a joint, that doesn't hurt you, it doesn't affect you. If somebody decides to eat sugar, that doesn't hurt you, it hurts them. So, you're free to not associate with them. You're free to completely refuse them service in your business, to never talk to them, to do whatever you want, never visit them, never go to their home, never go to their neighborhood. And that's perfectly fine. But the idea that you are going to have to kill them or threaten to kill them because you don't like what they're doing to themselves, I think this is just criminal, and that there's no other way for it. This is, the fact that just because a bunch of congressmen, who are almost all corrupt, decide that, we are going to make this a punishable offense, then that becomes that becomes justified, I think is absolutely absurd. Not, the initiation of violence is the problem. And so somebody who's being peaceful, whatever it is that they're doing, as long as it's peaceful, it's none of anybody's business. And anybody who initiates violence against them, under whatever pretext, if it's because God told you, or if it's because, the state passed the law, it's all equally absurd. The initiation of violence is always wrong.
So in your opinion, and maybe I'm paraphrasing too much here, but in your opinion, crimes, or crimes, as I guess we would say, that are personal, that are not hurting people around you, should be decriminalized, and then violence are the crimes that we should, as a society, punish. Is that generally speaking your philosophy?
Exactly. It's essentially the rejection of the initiation of violence. That's what anarchism is. So people generally think that anarchy means chaos, and that's complete opposite of reality. Anarchy, the technical definition of what anarchy is Monarchy is you have one guy who rules. Democracy is monarchy is one guy who rules. Anarchy is no rule. The idea is that nobody gets to put a gun to people's head and tell them, here's what you do. That does not mean that you can't have rules. You can have rules. It's just that those rules are freely agreed to. So that the simplest example that I like to express, if we have anarchy, that doesn't mean we can't play soccer together. We agree to play soccer, or we can agree, you and I, to have a boxing match where you and I agree that we're going to be punching each other. We can agree that, I'm going to be your boss and I'm going to tell you what to do and you're going to listen. And then at the end of the month, I'm going to pay you. These are all things that can be agreed upon within an anarchic society because it's purely voluntary. The problem is when the problem is the initiation of violence. The problem is the idea that somebody has the right to put a gun to people's head and tell them this is what you need to do and this is what you cannot do. And so anarchy, we don't have an anarchist society today for the same reason that we don't have a society with zero theft or zero rape or zero murder. It's just human nature. People will always do bad things to one another. People will threaten each other. People will kill each other. That doesn't make any of those things correct. However, we have societies that are far more anarchist than others. Switzerland is a place where you're largely free to do pretty much whatever you want. Nobody bothers you in Switzerland as long as you don't bother anybody else. And as you can imagine, life there is not very bad. On the other hand, the places where you have the least amount of anarchy, where you have the notion of government coercing others and enforcing rules on others being considered sacrosanct, where everybody accepts the right of the president to kill or shoot or do whatever he wants, and in places where the government intervenes in all aspects of individual life and aspects of personal decision making and in economic ideas, in economic transactions, these places end up being in terrible shape. So North Korea is the best counterexample of what Switzerland is.
It's funny you bring up Switzerland because I currently have legal proceedings pending against someone from Switzerland for breaking a contract violation. So certainly a fitting topic here on the podcast. But I agree with a lot of what you're saying. In fact, that's probably the most reasonable explanation of anarchy that I've heard from someone before. But do you feel like maybe that not having strict defined rules as a society how we're going to protect people could have negative repercussions in terms of violence? Because I think that when people think about the number one primary goal of the government, at least at a domestic level, is to keep them safe, is to protect them from bad people. It is within human nature to do bad things. There were many people that I think there has to be some degree of protection against. Do you worry about those people within that system?
No, I worry about those people within the government system, because in a society with government, those are the people who end up in charge of government. So if you're worried about the sociopaths and the criminals, don't have a government, because that's just a place for them to go and act out their sociopathic tendencies with complete impunity. I mean, there is no such a thing as an honest politician. If you're honest, you don't succeed in politics. That's just the way that it is. Friedrich Hayek, one of my favorite economists, he has a paper. He's written a paper, I think the title of it is Why the Worst Get on Top. And the idea is simple, in a free market, in a business, who ends up being the chairman of a company, the CEO, or who ends up being the boss, or who ends up being in charge of important things in a society is always whoever is better at it. So let's say we live in a town, you're pretty good at running a restaurant, I'm very bad at it. You're going to end up running many more restaurants and owning more restaurants than me. And so markets are natural meritocracies. And doesn't mean that there can't be hierarchy. There will be hierarchies because people will want to work for you and take orders from you because you're better at the job than me. So on the other hand, in governments, governments are natural opposites to meritocracy. If you're an honest politician and you're running for office because you want to really actually make the world better, you have no choice. You have no chance in front of the corrupt politician who's going to take money from special interests and to try and further their agenda and so on. So in general, all of the things that government supposedly does, if they were useful, if they were good, there's no reason why they can't be done in a free society and provided consensually. So if your concern is protection, and that's the one thing that most people think of as the role of government, there's absolutely no reason why private companies can't provide you with protection. So, protecting you does not need the initiation of violence. Okay. So if you want protection, you can hire private companies that can protect your house. You can hire insurance companies. And there's an important book by Hans Hermann Hoppe called The Myth of National Defense. You could look into it on this issue that goes through explaining how defense would look like in a free society. And in fact, it's not very different from what it looks like today. I mean, today, if you're a bank or if you're a jewelry shop which has a lot of valuables in it, you're not relying on the police for your protection. If you're a rich person, if you're a politician, you're not relying on the police for your protection. The police don't protect they hardly protect anybody. It's private security companies that do all of that protection. And private security companies, there's a reason why we hear about all of these stories of police abuse, but we never really hear about stories of private security companies abusing people. You don't see stories of shopping mall security guards brutalizing minorities or assaulting women like you hear about the police. And the reason is private security guards work in productive businesses and natural meritocracies. And if they do something like that, they get fired. And if they don't get fired, the mall goes out of business, right? So
capitalism.
Exactly. Capitalism is just another word for free association. It's just how people cooperating with one another and working together. So security can be provided, and there's no reason why we need to initiate coercion. That's the key thing. So if you're worried about security, you can hire people to take care of that. But if the only reason why you need a government is to initiate violence. So then if you want to go around throwing 15-year-olds in jail and ruining their life for smoking a joint, well then, yeah, you need a government for that, because you're a private security company. If you have a private security company that goes around doing that thing to 15-year-olds, it would be attacked by their private security company. It would not be good for business. It would fall apart.
So why do you think we've not seen any free societies be successful to this point?
We have, in fact. I mean, the only issue is that you need to stop thinking of it as being a black and white scenario. So it's again, to go back to the example of murder. There's always been murder, theft, rape. These things have always existed. But the less that stuff exists, the more peaceful, the more prosperous, the happier the society is. And so the freer the society is today, it's inarguable. The less government interferes in people's lives, the better off the society is. And the examples are endless. I mean, you compare North Korea to South Korea. You compare East Germany to West Germany. I mean, it's the same country, the same people. And, the more freedom in Germany versus less freedom in East Germany. And by the 80s, millions of East Germans were dying to go to the west of Germany. Nobody was trying to go from West Germany to East Germany. And Switzerland, which is almost the same people as well, their neighbors, they're even freer than West Germany. And West Germans, if they leave West Germany, they go to Switzerland. They go and try and work in Switzerland. So I think, that if you just start understanding it as a matter of shades of gray, you see this. You see this everywhere.
Yeah, that's actually a great answer. I was thinking about it too, black and white. Certainly, there are different degrees of freedom that you have within your society. That makes sense to me. This is actually a question that I personally have. We're getting pretty far off the topic of Bitcoin, but why not? It's my podcast. We can talk about whatever we want to. So this is a problem that I see within the U.S. political system as it is today. I see two massive, powerful parties, and I no longer think that anyone is fighting for smaller government. I don't see that from either of them. They both just want to make it bigger. They want to maybe they don't want to raise taxes, but they want to spend more. They want to increase government authority. They want to come bigger and bigger and bigger. And what I worry about is, as someone that has always tried to value, removing government bloat, making these programs smaller, at least from my personal point of view, I'm worried that there's now not really options for people that want smaller government. In fact, if anything, it's going to become bigger and bigger. It has through every single president. Their powers expand and the amount of spending increases. So what do you think? Is there a solution to this? Or is that
the option is there, but the option has never been through the political system. I mean, the idea that you're going to try and limit the political system, limit government through the political system is I think has proven to be a complete failure. And a lot of libertarians have tried to do this for a while, including, some of the most important libertarian theorists like Rothbard over the years, allying with particular political parties and so on. But, the lesson learned from all of that is that if you succeed, you will only succeed in bringing in people who are going to expand the government. And if you're trying to bring in people who don't want to expand the government, they're not going to succeed. It's just the reality of what government does. Government is a machine that is trying to always increase its size, increase its wealth, increase its power over others. So you can own, by playing in that game, by voting, by giving that game the legitimacy of accepting its outcomes onto your life and its rule on your life by going there and going in and voting, you're not going to ever reduce the size of it. You're just going to give it more legitimacy. And so, within the two political systems, Democrats pretend to be against, say, the military expansionism and foreign policy. Republicans pretend to be against, interference in the market economy and so on. But once anybody gets in power, what rules their decisions, by the time you've made it to power, the only thing that's remaining of your ideals is how do I stay in power? And that means essentially the same thing. I genuinely don't believe that for all of the drama and for all of the hysteria in US politics today, I don't think there would have been any major differences in the actual functions of the US government over the last 20 years if every single election had gone the other way. If Hillary had beaten Trump, if Romney had beaten Obama, if Clinton had or Bush had lost to Kerry, I doubt there would have been any difference in any of these things. I think it's just the same system. And the alternative is not a political party, because a political party, I think, is a problem. From my anarchist perspective, the alternative is to opt out of that system, to instead have your life and have your efforts and your resources go towards voluntary systems, family, your local community, your company, whatever organizations you're part of. Focus on that, because at the end of the day, I don't follow politics at all, and it's astonishingly amazing how much freer your life becomes when you just turn off the TV and stop listening to those people and stop letting them dictate your life, because your vote isn't going to matter. It's a completely irrational idea to go into a voting booth and waste your time on something that will absolutely not matter. I mean, you could go and wash dishes and make $5, and that will make your life better off. So your vote isn't going to matter. Your only thing that you're doing is just getting yourself worked up and losing your energy, losing your focus, using your mind space. And instead of using it for something productive that helps your life, you're just getting angry at Republicans or getting angry at Democrats and hating people and choosing a tribe and hating the other tribe. And just if you snap out of that, you'll be astonished at how much more time you have. And the amazing thing about Bitcoin, to bring this back to Bitcoin, is that the one thing that you had to have, the one thing government had on you is money. They had a monopoly on money, and that just meant that everybody had to, at some level, be subject to what government says and does and wants. And Bitcoin is just the final jigsaw puzzle piece that allows you to completely opt out. And now, nothing that the government or the central bank does has to affect you if you choose not to.
So a couple of things here before we get back to Bitcoin that I just wanted to address. For starters, when we talk about the two-party system, a big problem for the Libertarian Party is that if you look at the candidates that they put forward, a lot of them are very weak. Gary Johnson was...
No, the Libertarian Party is a joke. The idea that you would have a Libertarian Party itself is a joke. I mean, it's like a porn star who's I'm a porn, who calls herself a virgin. It's absolutely insane. It means nothing. If you're a libertarian, you don't try to play the government game. That's how I think. And so I don't take the Libertarian Party seriously. You're right. I mean, Gary Johnson is even one of the least ridiculous of all of the people that they have. Like I looked at the recent website recently. I looked at some of the candidates that they field. I mean, the kind of cognitive dissonance that it would take in order for somebody to both be a libertarian and yet want to run for office is going to attract some pretty shady characters.
Fair enough. I also want to bring up when you said your vote doesn't matter. So this is a point I've had this discussion with many people, and I think the common response to that is if everyone thought that, then nobody would vote. So
That's exactly the point. If everybody did that, then everybody would take care of their own life, and then the importance of government in our life would decrease. I mean, the more people are concerned and obsessed with government, the more they give it legitimacy. The more people vote, the more legitimacy it has, and the more it becomes acceptable for government to interfere in more and more aspects of your life. And so, for me, the solution is for elections to start attracting 3% voter turnout. Once that happens, then if you don't like Trump, or if you don't like Obama, well, if they have 3% of the population voting for them, or 2% or 1%, they're not going to be able to get away with a lot of bad things, and that's really what it is. And I think it's a sign of mental instability to have your own happiness and your own success in life be dependent on people in office. Like, if you really think that you're miserable right now because Trump is in office, and if only Hillary had won, then my life is better, or the other way around with Romney or Obama or any of those people, your problems in life won't be solved by Obama or any of those people. The problem is much deeper than that. The problem is that you want those people to solve your life, and that's, I think, in the modern world, it's because government has come to replace the function of family, the function of the tribe, the function of society. Instead of taking care of your life, you just wait for government to do that for you. And then you see this in so many ways. Like people, when you talk to people, for instance, about diet, many people would not want to take charge of their own health, and instead they refuse to see it that way, of just, what should I eat? And they continue to think of it from the perspective of public policy. Our government should be funding research into this diet to figure out what's the right way to eat. Gary Taubes, for instance, the author of Good Calories, Bad Calories, and The Case Against Sugar, a hugely influential author. He's been writing about the damages of sugar for the last 10, 20 years. He's absolutely influential in the low carb community and so on. And yet, when he talks about sugar, he ends his book or an article, he ends it with saying, but how bad is sugar, and how much better would our lives be if we didn't eat any sugar? And for someone who's a libertarian, for me that just means, well, try a couple of weeks without sugar and see what happens. I guarantee you're not going to die from sugar deficiency, but just try it. And yet he concludes, it's astonishing. He concludes with, unless our authorities and the public health agencies finance research into this, we will never know. That's absurd. No, you will know. Just quit it yourself. And
I think we have a little connection loss here. Well, and that's we got a little connection loss. So until we've got that figured out, when I think about sugar, the science is in on that one. It's not like, what do we got going on? Oh, I think we're back. Are you back?
Okay, we're back.
We're back.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, well, so sugar is not something where the science is out on it. People know that sugar is bad for you, and most nutritionists would recommend either no sugar or very, very low amounts of sugar. The problem with sugar is that it is addictive. It is addictive, and that people are not able to stop eating sugar because your body reacts to it just like it does from many addictive drugs, where it starts to crave it and need it, and then you will have withdrawals from it if you have sugar constantly, and then you stop having sugar. So, I mean, sugar is terrible. The amount that's allowed in our food is sort of hilarious, given the fact that so many drugs are illegal. I'm totally on board with all of that. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just, I think the really dangerous thing is this idea that you can't take your own decision about whether you want to smoke weed or have sugar or drink alcohol or do any of those things. It's not an individual choice. People think that it has to be a choice that is taken at government, federal level. And that's insane. That's the problem. That's more of a problem than sugar itself or weed or alcohol. People, the kind of mentality that thinks, it was wrong to smoke marijuana in Colorado a few years ago, but now it's okay to smoke marijuana in Colorado. I'm going to just say what I really think about that. It's slave morality. You're a slave if you think like that. If your morality is determined by what others are telling you is correct or bad, if you need the government to tell you whether you should eat sugar or not, or whether you should smoke weed or not, I think that's just slave. That's how slaves function and think. You're not capable of thinking, making up your own mind, and I think that's what anarchism and libertarianism is for me. It's just understanding that this is my body. Nobody can force me to stuff things down my mouth if I didn't want to. And at the end of the day, for all the stuff that governments do, it's very hard for them to stop you. They can throw you in jail, but at the end of the day, you could still get drugs in pretty much any American city. Complete prohibition, you could still get alcohol in pretty much any American city. And I don't see this changing with anything. If you ban anything, people will just find a way around it. So, whether you like it or not, you are the one in charge of your own life. And even when you think that others are in charge of making decisions for you, sorry to break it to you, but you're the one who chooses to let them make those decisions for you. You're the one who chooses to make those decisions that way. Nobody can watch how much sugar you eat. And so if you decide that you're going to follow dietary guidelines, you are deciding to let others decide for you. You can't get rid of your own free choice. And libertarianism is just a recognition of that. So then how much sugar am I going to eat? Am I going to listen to this guy or that guy, or am I going to try things myself and see what's best for me?
Personal responsibility is something that I think has gone amiss in society today. And I see this constantly. I see this in poker all of the time, where people, they feel like, they're losing because of this factor or that factor or the other factor. It's like, no, maybe you're losing because you're not working hard enough. Maybe you're not studying enough. Maybe you're not playing the right games. It's just so, and don't get me wrong, poker today is much tougher than it was back in the day. So I understand the plight of the upcoming poker player, but it's like people love to just kind of pass that blame onto something else when one of the things that I've always loved about life, in fact, this is probably my favorite thing about life in general, is when you're passionate about something and you set out to work in it and try and improve at it, some kind of game, something that you're working on. And then, life is really a meritocracy in all of these aspects, and you get to see how good you are. And if you suck, you lose, and that's good. It's good to see that you suck at something and improve. And one of the things I think gets really lost in society today is that losing is okay. Losing is actually good, because losing is truthful. That's what I like about losing. When you lose at something because you weren't very good at it, and then you can decide, okay, am I going to improve or do I want to try something else? And that should be part of life, and that should be something that we all relish more than I think that we do. Instead, we want to all be successful because we're all special. We're all amazing. Yeah. We're all unique, guys. No, honestly, going back to your example earlier, some people are shitty at running restaurants, right? It must be most people, because I've been to a lot of restaurants. No, I'm just kidding. The point remains.
And if you're shitty at it, you need to lose at it so that you stop doing it, so that you either change and get better at it or find something else that you're good at. That's just how life is. And you can't blame anybody else for your failure, because whether it's poker or the restaurant, nobody forced you to play that game. If the game is rigged, the table is rigged, the people planning the poker game are rigged, the cards are rigged. Don't play these games. People keep playing the same stupid game, and they keep losing, and they keep complaining that it is rigged. It's pathetic.
Yeah, don't play the game. So let's bring it back and talk about some cryptocurrency stuff. I thoroughly enjoyed that 45-minute detour. All right, so let's talk about altcoins in general, because I know that you are I'm gonna say Bitcoin maximalist. Would you say that that's a fair way to describe you? Do you have any thoughts on altcoins in general? Are there any particular ones that you think are more legitimate than others? I see some people in the chat have been talking about the Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash debate. If you want to talk anything about that, really, I'm going to open the floor here to any of the major or minor altcoins that you might want to discuss, and your general thoughts on altcoins as a topic.
So my general thought is that none of them matter. The only one that matters is Bitcoin. And when people tell me that they're competition for Bitcoin, I don't agree at all. I think the competition for Bitcoin is the dollar, the euro, gold, the IMF standard drawing rights. That's Bitcoin's competition. And they are not competition for it, and they are not backup plans for it. If Bitcoin fails, that's it. For me, I'm not interested in any of the others. They have absolutely no purpose for me. I will never think of them as an alternative. If Bitcoin dies, for whatever reason, if Bitcoin fails, it's going to be trivial to kill all the others. And so, and the reason is simple. It's just the production of money is one of this is the main topic of my book. And it's just something that has been a huge deal in all of human history. Because anybody who has the right, or has the ability to create money, to create the actual unit that is money, will, if history is any guide, history shows us that they will take advantage of that. I mean, if you found yourself with a printer that can print you exact replicas of $100 bills in your basement, it's going to be very hard to resist it.
And sorry. I was going to say that's going to be everyone soon enough, but let's just carry on here.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very hard to resist it. And, you could do it because you want to just go and party, but you could also, usually what people do is, they don't want to do it that way. They pretend it's for the public good or for the children or because we want to build hospitals or because we want to fight the enemies or something or the other. But there will always be excuses that will drive people towards this temptation of making more money. The insanely beautiful thing about Bitcoin for me is that it's just a software solution to this human failing. We found the software patch for that bug in humanity, which is to always make more money. And it's just that the money supply is outside of your control, and it's outside of the control of anybody who wants to use Bitcoin. And for me, that's infinitely preferable to any system in which somebody has the ability to change the rules and then change the money supply. So, if we wanted systems where humans are in charge of the money supply, we already have the central banks, and we have and we can have even private currencies that people will issue, but they will be centralized. I'll create a new coin and I'll say this is the supply and I'm in charge of it and I'm going to manage my money supply as I want. And I think that would be fine. If we got a centralized coin, if we got somebody to go ahead and say, this is my coin and I'm going to create it, I'm going to run it, I would welcome that kind of competition to Bitcoin. I don't think it would beat Bitcoin, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But that would at least be honest, because you're in charge of it. The problem with all the altcoins is that they imitate Bitcoin's structure, which is extremely inefficient, extremely expensive, and an extremely elaborate and just inefficient way of running a currency and a payment system, and whose only purpose is to make Bitcoin immutable and outside of the control of any single individual. They imitate that exact structure and still have a guy in charge. So this is an example of what I call cargo cult engineering. It's just, let's imitate the rituals of what Bitcoin does, and then we'll pretend that is going to allow us to be like Bitcoin. It's exactly as stupid as the child who takes a red towel, puts it on his back, and then jumps off of the window thinking that, well, Superman has a red towel and it works out for him, so let me just do this and it'll work out for me. It doesn't, and it won't. So fundamentally, the problem is this. After Bitcoin was invented, it was the first one, and the guy who invented it disappeared, and Bitcoin yet continued to operate. Why does it continue to operate and succeed and not get hacked? Because it was a useful invention, and because enough people dedicated time and money and resources to running the code, to mining the coins, to trading them, to building infrastructure around it, to building wallets and software and improving the software and so on. So Bitcoin has grown without anybody being in charge of it. It's a spontaneously emergent order. The shape of what Bitcoin is today has not been determined by anybody. In fact, there's, if you think that Satoshi made Bitcoin, this is becoming an exceedingly untenable position to keep, because most of the things that define what Bitcoin is right now were not even mentioned in the Bitcoin Whitepaper. So, and the Bitcoin code that Satoshi introduced had a lot of problems with it. Maybe not necessarily most of them are problems, but it has changed and it has been optimized and it's been improved. So the point is that nobody's really in charge of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a spontaneously emergent order out of the actions of humans, not the design of any one particular person. And so this, for me, is the ideal way of running a monetary policy. It can never get any better than this, because Bitcoin has the most guarantee. Nothing is 100% guaranteed in life, but Bitcoin is the surest thing we have to a credible monetary policy. We know what Bitcoin supply is going to be 5, 10 years, 50 years from now, with far more certainty than with any other kind of money. Because any other kind of money has somebody in charge of it and somebody able to increase the supply and bring out more of it. So once that was invented, once we had that technology, once that was out in the wild and it survived in the wilds of the internet and grew to the massive size that we have today. At that point, if you came along and you said, if you came along and you wanted to invent something, and if you wanted to work with this technology, we already have a digital technology for moving value around the internet, and it's already workable. There is an infinite amount of applications that can be built on top of that. So if you want to compare it to the wheel, we already built the wheel. Now we can, we've got thousands of years to figure out how to make wheelbarrows, and then horse-drawn carriages, and then cars, and all sorts of things that utilize wheels. So all the good engineers, all the smart engineers who want to be useful, who want to invent something useful, will take the wheel and then we'll build on it. The only way that you might want to go, and the only reason that you might want to go and say, well, I'm going to just make a different wheel, in the case of Bitcoin, is, I'm going to make another currency. The only reason that anybody has done that is that they are in charge of that thing. And so if you look at all the altcoins, every single one of them, it either has a foundation with clearly identifiable individuals who are in charge of it. It has a group of people that are basically able to change the rules whenever they want. And it's trivial. There are more than 2,000 of these altcoins today. There are 2,000 of these coins everywhere. And it's absolutely trivial for me to name the people behind them, if you ask me. From the 2,000 of them, if there's any one of them that you've heard of, if you've heard of any of these coins, the only reason you heard of it in that mania of 2,000 coins is because of the marketing effort being put in by people. Okay? So somebody coded the code, somebody marketed it, somebody promoted it, and somebody has worked hard to try and market this as the Bitcoin killer, or Bitcoin 2.0, or the smart contract platform, or a faster, cheaper, easier, whatever Bitcoin. Somebody put in a direct effort into this. And that person is still there. That person didn't do that out of charity, because if they were just concerned with the technology, they would have gone and built on Bitcoin. So they're still in charge, and it's truly trivial to show it, because the best example for me, and that's the moment when I really became completely convinced that all of the other shitcoins are just shitcoins and will never have any important role except as a way for scammers to make money out of people who buy them thinking that they're the next Bitcoin, is when Ethereum had their hard fork a couple of years ago. Because if the second biggest and most valued cryptocurrency can just simply be hard forked and changed and have the record of transactions changed, well, then what's the point of having a blockchain? What's the point of using all of this extremely expensive method of validation and proof of work and all of that stuff, if then, the people in charge, the Ethereum Foundation guys, get together in a couple of weeks, they fork it and change the whole thing. And Ethereum is also provides us an excellent example in what matters most to me, which is the money supply. They have no idea what they're going to do with the money supply. They're arguing about it on Twitter and Reddit, and they're going to change it. And it's a political thing. Well, if you want political money, you're better off going with the Federal Reserve. If you want a group of people to decide what happens with your money, go with the Federal Reserve. It's much better than trusting a bunch of teenager coders who have never handled money supply in their life. At least, the Federal Reserve has got grown-ups with gray hair who have been in this business for many, many years. And at least, there's some sort of political accountability if you're into that kind of thing. But
let me jump in, because I've been slowly taking some notes here on things I want to talk about, but you just keep tackling new subjects, and so the list of notes is going long. But let me just play devil's advocate here for on a few of the points that you brought up. And the first one I want to talk about is that people can't control the money supply of Bitcoin, which is something that it's one of my personal favorite things about Bitcoin, but is an extremely important fact. However, the miners can decide to hard fork the coin. So in reality, there are a group of people that in essence could decide to change it. They're just incentivized not to, because it's to their benefit to not change it. That would be that. I mean, I believe that to be true.
Not quite, because if any of those people change it, all that happens is that they end up with another shitcoin. So the moment that you change Bitcoin's rules and deflect from the Bitcoin consensus code, all that needs to happen is for two nodes on the current Bitcoin implementation to continue to function without moving on to your hard fork, and then Bitcoin continues to survive. Okay, so unless there's something that would kill Bitcoin in its current form, like let's say, hypothetically speaking, we come up with a new, something comes up that the Bitcoin hashing algorithms are compromised, and so your node is not secure and your coins can be hacked because some new kind of computer can hack through, like it can hack through the current implementation of the current mining algorithm of Bitcoin and encryption or whatever. So in that situation, you would, we'd have a hard fork, and anybody who's left behind would be would have their coins gone, and would just the old implementation would die. But other than that, if there's no fatal threat, if there's no existential threat to Bitcoin, then anytime you propose a hard fork, unless it has unanimous agreement from everybody else, unless it has 100% of all the members of the network agreeing to it, then all it takes is for two people to remain behind, and then the old Bitcoin survives, and you just have a shitcoin. And the reason it is a shitcoin, and not, the reason the two people are the ones that are running the Bitcoin, and yours is just the shitcoin, is because yours is built on the premise that, hey, we changed the rules because of, we think it would be better to have more supply or something or the other. So I think, what we've seen with the attempts to change Bitcoin, even when it was much smaller than what it is today. I mean, remember 2014, 15, people were talking about changing Bitcoin, and people were having whiny rage quits about their inability to change Bitcoin, even when Bitcoin was much smaller than what it is right now. And what has that shown us is that, the Schelling point of the current implementation of Bitcoin, the Schelling point of the current broad parameters of what Bitcoin is very, very strong. And so breaking out of it is extremely difficult. And the key thing is this: look, I'm not arguing that it's just inevitable or impossible that these things will change. I'm saying compared to the other shitcoins, it's incomparable. And compared to the government shitcoins, it's also incomparable. Tomorrow the US Federal Reserve can do whatever the hell it wants with the dollar. But with Bitcoin, the amount of certainty that we have about the money supply is far higher than all the others. And none of the coins has even come anywhere near trying to demonstrate the fact that they are immutable. In fact, that's the last thing that they care about, because they don't understand what Bitcoin is. They think Bitcoin is about cheap, easy transactions, or buying drugs, or one of those many other stupid things that motivate the design of these shitcoins. But none of them are into immutability as a feature, because they all want to be in charge.
Well,
how Monero hard forks every couple of months or whatever. But yeah, go on.
So there are certainly some coins that are immutable. It's not just Bitcoin. For example, Litecoin is as well.
No, Litecoin is. Litecoin is. It's a joke. It could be very easily hacked, or not hacked, but I mean, the consensus that exists about it.
Sorry, just for a second. Litecoin has a $4 billion market cap here. I feel like if Litecoin could be hacked, we would have seen some pretty sizable meltdowns before this point.
No, I think it's just look, the only reason Litecoin survives is because it doesn't matter, like all the other shitcoins. The Bitcoin is the one that matters. Like, and the question is this: if you have the sort of concentrated attempt at taking down Bitcoin that we've seen so far, the people who have tried to change Bitcoin's immutability, I genuinely am not very generous in my interpretation of the actions of some of the crazy characters that we have in Bitcoin who are concerned trolling their way into trying to destroy Bitcoin's immutability. I don't think that's entirely motivated by saving children in Africa and increasing transaction throughput. I think that is concentrated attempt to trying to bring down the one thing that matters about Bitcoin. I mean, the notion, anybody who supported the hard fork, or the idea that let's double the capacity of Bitcoin in order to make it scale, compromise immutability so that we can have double the transactions per second, I think that's an enormously stupid position to take. And I think, and the point is that kind of attack, if you had these people, if you had the amount of media attention that was given to these people, if that sort of attack was launched on Litecoin or on Monero or on any of those shitcoins, it would be absolutely trivial to implement it, because the number of developers, the number of coders, the number of holders of the coin, and the number of node operators, independent nodes that run nodes on this, is far small. And it's,
here's the thing though. I heard a clip from Andreas on this, about when he was talking about what it would take to destroy the Bitcoin network, and the amount of power that it would take, and the amount of money that it would take. And then once you get there and you'd be able to do it, you'd realize that if you started mining, you could make way more money. Why are you doing this? Okay, even in this world that couldn't exist, where you And I guess I would say that I feel the same way about a lot of these other altcoins as well, at least the proof of work ones, where if you got to a point where you could destroy the network, well, it would be way more profitable for you to just facilitate transactions. So
Yeah,
I,
but it's not the proof of work attack that makes them shitcoins. I mean, that's
yeah, but
only
you
one of
can't
it. But
just
the
you
one
can't just
is the nodes. It's just how many nodes and independent implementations are there out there, and
sure,
how
but
hard is
even
it for some, if the people who made this coin, if the most important figures in it, and the communities in it, went up and said, let's double the supply or change the money supply or do this or that, it'll be very easy for them to get that across in any coin but Bitcoin.
there are so for starters, of the 2,000 currencies, the vast majority are total shit coins. No, there's no argument here. The vast majority are also ICOs slash probably ERC20 tokens. Also, that's in general a joke. So I'm not arguing for the fact that these are all great, super awesome currencies that are going to change the world. I'm far from arguing that. My
Yeah.
only point is, I feel like if you say that none of them are immutable, I feel like when you say things like that, it's not exactly true, because some of these other proof of work coins are the proof of work is on the same way as Bitcoin. So they would be just as immutable as Bitcoin, except for the fact that the transaction throughput is so much larger for Bitcoin that it keeps it safer. So I guess I just feel like
No, no, no. The test is not the proof of work. The test is this. Imagine what happened last year with Bitcoin, the S2X debacle, and when all the Bitcoin startups and many of the major names in Bitcoin, Gavin Anderson and Roger Ver and all those people, everybody got together and rallied behind, we want to change Bitcoin's code just to double the block size. And we're talking only about the block size. And what happened with them? They canceled their hard fork, and then a bunch of scammers launched the Bcash shitcoin, and that's it. That's all that has happened from it. And the fact, unless your coin can resist something like that, I'm not even interested in entertaining it. Okay, it's absolutely trivial for any of these coins to change compared to Bitcoin. That's really the key thing. So the Bitcoin node operator, and the reason is that the people who are interested in immutability all ended up on Bitcoin. If you're in this business for immutability, you go to Bitcoin. You don't go to a coin that has a guy with fancy asshole kind of mugshot in Fortune magazine talking about how, well, Satoshi was limited in his, and now what we can do is much better. Getting these glowing profiles of scammy articles. That's not where the people who want immutability go. That's where, so all these coins are only attracting short-term speculators and people who don't really get the economic value of it.
What do you think about the unique properties of many of these other altcoins? Because Bitcoin, while it might be the best store of value, I think undoubtedly it's the best store of value. It's much older technology. It's based on code from a while ago. Yes, it's been constantly updated to improve, but if you start a currency with having seen what happened before with Bitcoin and trying to and then many other currencies have come up as well, and try and plan around advancements to solve problems that Bitcoin has faced, isn't there opportunity for people to start currencies that do have unique properties that can bring value that maybe aren't the same as what Bitcoin has to offer?
No, I mean, for me, this is like saying, well, the Zimbabwe dollar or the Egyptian pound or the Brazilian, whatever it's called, is better than the US dollar because you can make better kites out of it, or better toilet paper, or better wallpaper, or whatever. It doesn't matter. That's not the point. All these applications that people are talking about building on top of their shitcoins, it doesn't matter. We can build those applications on centralized platforms. They don't need to be on blockchain. After all these years, and all this talk about, well, our coin is going to do this and this and that. Till today, no single coin does anything Bitcoin cannot do. They all do the same thing. It's a chain, a record of transactions, and a set of UTXOs, and private key, public key combination where you change the ownership of the coins by entering your private key. That's it. That's what every single coin does.
What about Monero? Monero transactions are private. That is different than Bitcoin.
It's not really different. First of all, the very important thing to keep in mind here is that all these people pretend that their coins are being innovative, but every single one of them is just stealing code from Bitcoin coders. No competent developers are working on shitcoins. The Monero is a good example. The code that Monero uses is just code produced by Bitcoin developers. And Monero is the shitcoin that bothers me the most because it's the one that has managed to convince most Bitcoiners, that it is the one that is the best. And so whenever I talk about Monero, I get a lot of angry shitcoiners calling me, and a lot of angry Bitcoiners as well. It's the one that pisses Bitcoiners off the most because it's an affinity scam. It's a scam that has marketed itself by, if you look at the people behind it, they go around calling shitcoins, and somehow, they sneak in on the side of the Bitcoiners. But really, it's just taking Bitcoin code and using it to launch a pump and dump scheme. It's not workable.
I could be wrong, but
it's not workable because there's a reason that code isn't implemented on Bitcoin, because it's just absolutely impossible for it to scale. The number of transactions that you can have on Monero is very, very tiny, and so it won't even scale to the level of Bitcoin. The only thing it is useful for is to market it as this cypherpunk ideal, and then have pump and dump schemes on exchanges. That's what it really is about. So people are making money off of it.
I guess I just don't understand, because privacy on transactions is something that's a valuable thing to have privacy when you send someone money. And Bitcoin is a public ledger and Monero is not. So why, I guess I don't understand why there's not value if you want private transactions in using Monero. And this is just as one example of one currency. Privacy does have value. I don't see why you don't agree that privacy has value.
Because I think, there have already been studies that show that that Monero's privacy could be compromised. And I think, this notion of going around and marketing it's absolutely extremely irresponsible that you look online and, you go to their website and they talk about it. Monero is safe, come here, buy your drugs with us. And of course, the people that are using it to buy drugs have absolutely nowhere near the technical competence it would take to assess these claims and whether it is actually possible for it to be hard fork. And for me, I wouldn't use these things. I have no use for them anyway. But I tell people, you should start with the working assumption that all privacy coins are honeypots. All privacy coins are far more likely to be honeypots. That just find out who's installing Monero, and you've got a very good idea about who those people are. And then who knows what kind of exploits can exist on your computer that could detect and catch your private key and so on. There are an enormous amount of exploits, and that's why I always tell people, at least another 10 years of successful operation, of people auditing the code, of people finding bugs before you try to buy your drugs on Monero, if you want to buy drugs on Monero. And generally, I just always tell people, just do what normal junkies do and buy your drugs on the street if that's what you're into, or just quit doing drugs. That's a much better solution. If you have to enter personal information onto a computer on a shared ledger in order to get your fix, you've got Monero is not the solution to your problem. Your problem is your addiction, and you need to look into that. You're going to risking your own personal safety too much for this stuff. So it's just, I don't trust the code, because I don't think it's code is not something that is easy to demonstrate, because there are always levels of competence, and so only the top most competent coders will have the technical ability to assess it. And so I would not find that to be important. And I find the entire notion of let's make privacy on chain, I think is just a very bad starting point. It's like, let's make a towel out of water. If you want to make a towel, don't start with water. If you want private money, don't go with a shared ledger. Monero and Zcash go around this using an extremely elaborate and complicated structure. And the cypherpunk ideal of, don't trust, verify is not something that the people using those currencies are doing. Zcash, for instance, involved that trusted setup where you have to trust that the people at the beginning are all destroying their keys. And, another thing about it is, frankly, if those things really were as private as they claim to be, how are the people who are operating them, or who are talking about them and promoting them, just so open about it? Frankly, what these people are doing is they're saying, we want to make the world safe for the next Ross Ulbricht. We want to make the next Silk Road be untrackable, and so the government can't corrected. And that, I mean, I don't want to sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist, but that doesn't make you a little bit suspicious and cautious about it. Ross Ulbricht has had his life destroyed because he set up that website. And now we have these Silicon Valley VCs organizing giant ceremonies and listing their coin on exchanges and having glowing profiles for their coin being listed on newspapers. And you want to believe that, law enforcement is just looking there and applauding them as they go along and make this. I'm not saying it's a honeypot necessarily. I'm saying it's completely reckless for you to trust your safety to something like that.
I'm not going to even begin to comment on the code itself because I have actually zero knowledge there. So I'm certainly not going to try and debate any of those points. However, it seems to me that a lot of developers think that the Monero code is quite good. But let's move on from Monero. Let's talk about some other coins. Let's say, for example, you're a day trader and you make money from trading. Something like Binance Coin will actually have utility for you because now your transactions, you pay less money on those transactions. So couldn't something like Binance Coin actually have utility for traders?
No, it's absolutely insane. The notion that any business, even a real business that produces real value, would need its own currency is ridiculous. No restaurant introduces its own coin, and the restaurants that do introduce their own coin, the coin is not something that has a value that trades for itself. So McDonald's had a coin that allows you to have a Big Mac. I don't know if it's still around or if it was just some promotion at some point. But the point was that this was a coin that was redeemable for a Big Mac, and then the price of it is always just going to be equal to the Big Mac itself. And so, or for instance, you go to a casino or you go to an amusement park, you give them $100, they give you 100 chips. And that's it. That chip is there. It's just to facilitate the transaction and the removal of it. The notion that you're going to go to an amusement park and that the chips for the amusement park are going to be fluctuating in price, and then the rides are going to be fluctuating in price, is just, if any amusement park does that, it's going to go out of business because people, I want to go in, I want to know this ride costs $10. All right, here's my $10, put me on the ride. I don't want to go buy the $10 and then, oh no, your chips have depreciated and now you can't get on. It's unworkable. So you don't need your own currency. And all of these supposed solutions that require their own token, what you need is a second layer built on Bitcoin or on the dollar or anything else, built on an already established currency. So, instead of having this extremely complicated decentralized blockchain system, which of course is never going to be really secure as long as Bitcoin is around, the other blockchains are not going to be as secure as Bitcoin. So you're already running a business where you are a trusted third party, where you are a single point of failure. Pretending that this blockchain is going to make your business better, pretending that this blockchain is going to make things work better, is not going to work. It's not going to help you in any way operationally. And you can get whatever it is that you want far more safely by just adding a second layer transaction. So, Bitcoin casinos, you move your money around in the casino, you make a bet, and then you get money. And all of these things, they don't settle those transactions in the Bitcoin blockchain. The only transactions they do is when you put your money in and when you put your money out. And that's it. That's what you really need. Somebody just put on Twitter, another point is the only way that Monero is made workable is through an inability to detect the money supply. We never know what will happen with the inflation of Monero. We can't know what the supply of Monero is. And, that's just a serious limitation of it. And it goes back to the main point that I'm saying, which is that, sometimes in technology, tools are not meant to be for everything. Your car is not supposed to be a washing machine. You don't need to do your laundry while you're driving. You have your washing machine at home, you have your car. The car is optimized to get you from A to B. The washing machine is optimized to wash your clothes. And so this fixation with, we're going to make money better by adding a washing machine to it and adding all these other features to it, it's not relevant. Bitcoin works, it does what it does its job, and that's all that matters. And so, marginal improvements, marginal technological improvements here or there don't really matter to it. In
your mind, is there no difference between proof of work coins and ICOs? Are they you view them as exactly the same, or can you appreciate at least some subtleties to the difference of these currencies?
Oh, I don't see why I should. They're all shitcoins as far as I'm concerned.
All
I mean,
right.
look, if you want uncensorable money that nobody can control, that's immutable, you only have one choice: Bitcoin. If you want to get into day trading and try and figure out where the herd is going to go and what they're going to do, and pump it, buy before it pumps, and dump it before it dumps, good luck. But I have better things to do with my life. I'm not going to be getting into this trading.
Let's talk about that because that was one of the topics I want to discuss today. Do you have any
Mm-hmm.
thoughts on technical analysis? I know that the community has a wide array of opinions on the subject.
I go back and forth. I mean, my personal opinion is that I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't try it. I'm not going to try it at home. It's just something that doesn't really interest me. I'd rather, I hold a little bit of Bitcoin. I don't even hold that much Bitcoin because I think it's very volatile, and I have family. And I think it would be irresponsible for me to put all of our all of our resources into something that's so volatile. And I also prefer to have my mind clear for my work. That I don't want to have 70% drops in my family's net worth happen all the time. So I don't trade because I just don't think that that's a very responsible thing to do in the long run. I think there is some truth to the fact that technical analysis will work just because everybody else is looking at technical analysis, and there is some truth to those indicators. They could indicate something. I've seen so many people show ways in which when this happens, then you would expect that this would go on, and then because everybody uses the same trading playbooks, these things can be self-fulfilling. However, if you read Nassim Taleb, his book on the black swan,
He wrote the forward in your book, right?
yeah. But his book in the black swan, these things continue to work, and you keep making pennies on each trade until the one time that it doesn't work and you lose your shirt. So I wouldn't recommend it to people. If there are people who know how to make it work, well, good luck to them. But you have to always remember that when the people tell you that they know how it works and they tell you, well, I made 3 Lambos out of it. For every one person who's talking about making money out of that, there are many, many people who have shut up about it and don't talk about it. So you're only going to hear the stories of the people who know who have succeeded. So it's Russian roulette is a very successful strategy because all the people who have played Russian roulette and are still around to tell the story of it have made money. If you
That
didn't,
yeah,
if you,
that's also from Taleb's book, right? The Russian roulette example.
I'm pretty sure, yeah, it
Yeah.
must be.
So
So
Taleb, Fooled by Randomness, it's like probably the
yeah.
best book to read for poker players that's not poker strategy related to help you
Mhm.
understand like how the variance works. He's obviously a great writer, so
Yeah, definitely. His views on these things has influenced me a lot. And I think a key point that I'd like to make on technical analysis is let's face it, the people pumping and dumping shitcoins on one another does not create value, does not generate value. People using Bitcoin as a store of value, there is real value and real demand for it. So people are dumping their local governmental coins in the US as well as in Venezuela and Zimbabwe and Nigeria and all over the world. People are dumping their local shitcoins and buying Bitcoin, and it is helping them escape Venezuela. It is helping them save value into the future. There's value there. But people trading coins, it's a zero-sum game. There's no value being created. So yeah, you may have made 3 Lambos, but if you think it works, there's no somebody is paying for those Lambos. You have not produced anything by doing that trading, and so just so this is what religions and culture and society is always on about. That you want to be working in something that is productive. You want to be adding value because otherwise you're gambling, and it'll work today. It might work. You might get lucky, but it's really not a strategy that I would recommend in the long run because fundamentally you're not learning any useful skills that are productive to others. So fundamentally, at the end of the day, you want to be successful and happy in life. You can't have that without producing value to others. I've learned this, I think, a while ago, and people who understand this end up developing valuable skills for others, and they improve their lives by improving the lives of others. And I think that's how I would prefer to live my life. That's what I would tell my own son, if he asked me about shitcoin trading.
seems like a fair analysis. One quick note though, whenever
Mhm.
people use the word gambling in that context, I always get a little bit angry because here's the thing. Just because something is gambling does not make it negative EV. You can gamble with edge. So, for example, if we flip a coin and every time I win, you pay me 200, when you win, I pay you 100, even though that's gambling, I'm still doing it all day because I'm making money. So I think that the word gambling in the context of there is a lot of volatility should be separated sort of from when there's gambling
Yeah,
that
but I
basically gives
mean,
you an edge.
but in that sort of game, either you're going to run out of, you're eventually going to run. I'm going to run out of money if you're continuing to play this game with me, and then you're going to run out of idiots like me who would be willing to play that game. That's the
Sure.
problem with it.
But yeah, and that's a fair counterpoint. But the idea that gambling is inherently bad, I have to stand against that, because you can absolutely make money gambling, guys. By the way, I own a poker training website. I was no, I'm just kidding. Anyway, so I just want to say thanks for coming on the pod today, man. We got this was. For any of the viewers that have listened to all of the rest of the pods, this one was notably different. We got into some fairly deep social societal issues, and we had a wide range of topics to cover. But it was great. You have plenty to say, a lot to talk about. I just want to say thank you for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure. This has been a lot of fun for me too, Doug. Thanks for having me.
No problem, man. All right, that's going to do it. By the way, if you want to check out Saifedean's book, The Bitcoin Standard, I put the link to Amazon in the description below, so you guys can go ahead and check it out. I actually need to read that as well. I bet it's a great read. Anyway, I want to thank you.
There's an audiobook as well. If you guys, if you prefer to listen to it, you can also download the audiobook.
Awesome. Is there anywhere that people can check it out, or just over on Amazon?
On Amazon, and yeah, I mean, you can see also my blog and my website and my Twitter account where I'm shitposting all day, every day.
Yeah, you're good on Twitter, man. You're good on Twitter. You guys can also follow him over there at Saifedean. I could probably put a link in the description below afterwards. But that's going to do it here for today's podcast. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. It's good to get some different perspectives here on the podcast, and I think we did that today. We are going to be back on Thursday. Let me make sure we get this right. At 3 p.m., Josh Olszewicz, otherwise known as Carpe Noctem on Twitter, will be joining the podcast, 3 p.m. Pacific time. Should be a good one as well. Looking forward to it. I'll see you guys back then. Thank you for joining today.
All right, take care. Bye.